Hello, and welcome to my video essay, No Final Girl, Gender and Tragic Endings in TAG and 2LDK. Here, I analyze these two modern Japanese horrors, so let's get started with some background information. TAG is a 2015 extreme horror by Sion Sono, a director known in the festival circuit for his subversive and provocative films, in which the main character is, spoiler alert, stuck in the world of a video game controlled by an old man. 2LDK is a 2003 dual film by Yukino Tsutsumami, which was created for a competition with fellow filmmaker Rein Kutamaru. The rules were simple. Scripts could only have 2 to 3 characters, must be shot in a week with little budget in one setting, and finally, someone must die. 2LDK is an anagram for 2-bedroom, living room, dining room, and kitchen. It is about 2 actress roommates who discover they are both the final choices to be cast as the lead in a new movie. Both TAG and 2LDK fit into the British company Tartan's Asia Extreme label, which they started in 2001, for lower budget films that are reactionary to the dominant studio system. These films are compelling as they subvert from both classical Japanese Yuri horror stories with nuclear family tropes and also American slashers with harlots, but stick to it with subtleties. While it strays strongly from the traditional kabuki roots we often see in J-horror, the misogynistic tones carry over. In this essay, I am going to hone in specifically on the tragic endings of these films. Both directors have made films about suicide before, Tsunomi's 2019 12 Suicidal Teens and Sono's acclaimed Suicide Club in 2001. Suicide is a major social issue in Japan, with some of the highest rates in the world. TAG ends with suicide, and 2LDK in an almost mutual suicide scene, in which the women could easily overpower one another, but are content in their death. The freedom through death trope for women is hardly new. Classic stories such as Hedda Gabler and Swan Lake and their filmic adaptations have females regain their own agency from the men in the only way that is absolute. So they are free, but is this feminist? TAG and 2LDK may have feminist intent by showing the struggle of women and strong female characters. Strong is able to purvey violence, a traditionally masculine trait. However, the women are driven to violence against each other by the invisible hand of patriarchal power and abuse. They do not see each other as competition for self-improvement, but the acceptance of men, with the exception of queer readings, which I will touch on later on. Therefore, I will argue that TAG and 2LDK are not feminist films in the way that they portray death as the only outcome for women to free themselves from patriarchal abuse that causes the excessive violence throughout these narratives. I will show this through 3 main arguments. Number 1, man's world, woman's space. It's no surprise that feminine violence comes to fruition in the domestic safe space. In 2LDK, this is the apartment. The girls fight over hair in the drain, shampoo, and probiotic drinks. Typical petty problem, which boils further out of control once I find out they are both interested in the same guy from the agency, and jealousy ensues. There are multiple domestic items used during the fight. Ketchup, a toilet lid, boiling water, just to name a few. This brings up a quote on Kill Bill, another prominent female duel film. Quote, "The threat of female public violent action is subsumed by the private, essentially non-violent domestic space," unquote. TAG brings its violence into the school, the church, and an athletic race, all female-coded spaces that go awry due to the men controlling the game, which is part of what makes the film so interesting. Everything the women do, and there are only women for the majority of the film, is controlled by men, without their consent in the matter. This brings me to gender as a performance. Girls and women know what is expected of them and perform their role in society despite their true feelings. The queerness in TAG strays from this idea, which is why Misuku is forced to marry a pig and literally rip the woman she loves in half. The adulterous actions of Lana in 2LDK cause her trauma, as this is not what a good girl should be doing. In the words of Timothy Eales, quote, "Woman is to be an actress bringing to life the creations of man," unquote. The women in 2LDK are literally actors fighting over a role made by men, and the women of Tag are female-coded characters from video games from a male creator. On a more meta level, the women themselves are literally actors playing out characters for male filmmakers and their ideal. Als continues, quote, "The pattern of oppression here concerns the expression of legitimate female desires and opinions in favor of an imposed, idealized, artificial view of what a woman should be. This view reflects male fantasies of control. It allows male filmmakers and spectators to think of themselves as protectors, rescuers, or mediators for women, as educators able to guide women to the correct form of self-understanding," unquote. At the end of the film, the director changes the script to include both of the women. Wow, what a solution! But at this point, the damage is done. The man comes to save the day in this ironic ending, and the women look idiotic. In Tag, as Jenny Nolf suggests, it's almost like a meta-commentary to make up for Sono's own sexist views. Number 2. No Final Girl. Violence and sexuality are linked and are in excess in both films. First through the virgin vamp complex, or the virgin whore complex, however you'd like. The lead women of both films, Nozomi and Mitsuko, are seen as virginal and good, while other women in the films are described as promiscuous. While there are no issues with girls on either side, the issue is with the way that patriarchal society pits them against each other. In Tag, other students are called sluts, which is rebuked by homophobic remarks. In 2LDK, Nozomi is a country girl and Lana is from the city, so Nozomi hasn't been polluted by sexuality in the same way. The women share a kiss as Nozomi has never been kissed before, which makes her appear more as a victim despite her turning it around in her favor. This scene connects perfectly to my next point, on the male gaze. Cinematography and sound in these films emphasize sexuality and the female body as a prop. This is exemplified in what Linda William categorizes as body genres, low-brow, low-budget, and exploitative films to give the audience bodily reactions, in which these films certainly do. The camera is in a way disrespectful. Panty shots in Tag, creepy men on the bed, mirror shots, and padded bras in 2LDK. The massage scene, the kissing, Mitsuko's intimate relationship, they all eroticize the scripts, fetishizing female queerness for male pleasure. To connect this back to the endings, who is the killer? There is no masked man or ghost, and although there's still quite a bit of running away with Tag specifically, characters don't take the threat line down, but at what cost? Tag subverts final girl tropes and shows how harmful it can be, built on, to quote Natalie Ninj's video essay, a waste of female bodies and false tryout, unquote. We don't see these women in the same way as traditional slasher films. Drawing from the take, quote, "When women stab back, they become phallicized, which erases their femininity." An example of this is in 2LDK when Lana takes off her eyelashes. We know she means business, and her beauty is reduced. And in Tag, when Mitsuko starts breaking necks, we instantly see her as less passively innocent. Abuse and trauma is a motivator for women to get away from the threat. But when the threat is abuse and trauma caused by the patriarchy and internalized misogyny, there is nowhere to go, leading to Section 3, Death by Phallus. Lisa Couthart enforces that, quote, "The relation between action cinema violence and the phallic framework of castration has been brought to the fore in any number of postmodern genre films that repeatedly make explicit anxieties about castration," unquote. It's no secret that castration anxiety is what makes these menacing women so menacing. As strong women are a threat to the patriarchy. This is seen in phallic objects in both films. Chainsaw, knives, and swords in 2LDK, the broken bottle, and even the castrating vagina dentata alligator in Tag. Mitsuko and her alter egos free themselves in a form of ritual suicide, while Lana and Nozomi gracefully stab each other in unity. Both very clearly phallic objects. They could have killed themselves in any other way, but I argue that this was purposely done to show that men are indirectly responsible for their death. After all, tough girls reach their limits. Violence is very testosterone-driven, and these depictions of violence are told through patriarchal eyes, the male directors, which makes this symbolism even more meta. とにかくわしはお前の DNA を採取した。Women are only viewed as strong or badass when they give in to testosteronized impulses instead of seeking democratic solutions. These women don't attack their oppressors, they attack themselves and each other. On Kill Bill, Lisa Kuthar writes, quote, "The absence of patriarchy is an absence of violence and threat, and the female violence of the film is configured retroactively as temporary, aberrant, obligatory, and curative," unquote. In 2LDK and Tag, the patriarchy is loomingly present, so the threat ensues. There is no exit, except in death. While the rest of the film could be considered as meta-commentary on patriarchal ideals themselves, we don't get the vengeful, heroic ending male characters often get. We get death, which is, well, pretty anti-feminist. This is a very bleak way to look towards the future for women. To conclude, at the end of the day, horror seeks to bring to light anything that is repressed or shunned in society, and females being outside of their heteronormative, subservient, and safe domestic realm is most certainly that. In these films, this behavior is punished by death. Scholar Robert Hyland complements this argument, saying, quote, "The monstrous feminine is in fact entirely a construct of patriarchal society's fears of the female other, compounded and confounded by male anxiety," unquote. This, I feel, is caused by performativity, gender roles, and sexualization. The fear of strong and violent women is real, but what is missing from these films is a future where there's a way to escape the patriarchy that doesn't end in a penetrative death. These women also portray little nurturing qualities, which, although are not masculine, can make a woman a badass. What I'm wondering now is how these concepts and my own internalized misogyny affect myself as a female horror director. My film Beast ends with the lead character stabbing her attacker to death, with a hairpin, which is both a domestic and phallicized object. In conclusion, these tropes and gender roles affect us all, in work and in play, and you'll find it everywhere if you really look for it. Thanks for watching.